We create a distinction. These feelings over here on the bad side, I don't want to be feeling. These feelings on the good side, I want to be feeling. So when we feel a bad feeling, we create suffering because we're already telling ourselves, this isn't something I want to be feeling right now. I want to be feeling something good. And the same happens the other way around. When we're feeling something good, we want to hang on to it so much because we don't want to go back to feeling something bad. We're just in this constant flux of suffering needlessly, because at the core, those emotions that we experience are entirely neutral, the reflection of the thinking that we're having in this moment. What's up? Welcome to my channel. My name's Alex. I'm a coach, and this podcast is all about self-development and helping you to live a happier, more fulfilling life. And if you like something you hear in this video, be sure to hit that like button and hit subscribe for more. So on this week's In Focus session, I wanted to talk to you guys about how conscious are you of the suffering that you are creating. And this is a conversation that came up during my recent retreat in June in France. And it was a conversation around the suffering that we create internally with our thinking, right? And the reason that this came up is because one of my mentors, he has a saying that mental suffering is us suffering needlessly. We're needlessly suffering via the things that we're thinking. And what he means when he says that is that thought is just something that passes through us. We are not our thoughts. We've heard that hundreds or thousands of times in some cases, right? We are not our thoughts. So if we're not our thoughts and we are the observer of our thoughts, when we have thinking around something we are suffering over, we are suffering needlessly if we're buying into that thinking. And I'll give you an example of this. I used to think, throughout my life for a long time that I wasn't good enough. I used to think that I was a failure, that my life was just pointless and I wasn't good enough. And I was buying into the thinking. And I was buying into the story that my mind was creating around the thinking. And the way that our mind works, right, it's like an activity monster, right? It loves to just be busy and create things and get active. So if I give attention to a thought like I'm not good enough, then what my mind will do is go, oh, okay, you want to pick up on that. Let me fill in the blanks for you. Here's all of the ways that you might not be good enough. And if I continue to buy into the story, then I'm buying into the suffering. And there's an element of that where I'm choosing to buy into that. So the suffering that I'm buying into by believing that thinking, which is just random thought that's passed through my mind, but I've grabbed onto it and I've decided that this is the thought I'm going to give attention to. I'm not going to give attention to, oh, it's a blue sky today, or oh, look at those flowers, or oh, my shoelaces are untied, or whatever. I've given attention to this certain thought. My mind fills in the blanks and it creates a story to back it up. And the story that I then buy into is me suffering needlessly. And the example that I used whilst on the retreat was like, I like to go and see my physio quite regularly. He sorts me out. He gets his elbows in all sorts of places. And I book a session with him, say every 2 weeks it's been recently. And I book that session knowing that I'm going to go there and he's going to probably stick his elbows or his thumbs or something in somewhere in my body that hurts and it's going to be painful. And I'm not just going to suffer physically, but mentally I'm going to be suffering because I'm going to be thinking like, oh God, this is so painful. I need to get out of this right now. And I'm cool with that. That's why I keep going. I'm cool with it because I know on a very deep conscious level that I've chosen to put myself through that suffering. So I'm at peace with it. And because of that, it doesn't actually seem like suffering to me. I actually experience that as quite good fun. Like we have great chats while I'm there. He normally sorts something out. I always leave there feeling much better, even though there might be some physical pain along the way. But I go there and I genuinely look forward to the sessions because I consciously know on a deep level I have chosen to be there. I have chosen that suffering. I have created that suffering in my life because I've chosen to go and see the physio knowing that he's going to stick his thumbs and elbows and all sorts into all sorts of places and it's going to hurt, but I'm okay with it. And imagine we had the same level of deep consciousness over the suffering that we create mentally. How aware, how conscious are you of the suffering that you're creating? Are you going through your life thinking, oh, I'm not good enough, or I'll never find the right partner, or I'll never be happy doing the job that I do, or I don't have my purpose in life, therefore I'm not happy. If you're buying into that thought, it's just random thought. If you're buying into it, then you're creating the suffering that you're experiencing by giving that thought the attention that it doesn't really deserve. And like I said, the mind will respond to that. If you give the thought attention, the mind will respond by getting busy. It will get active. It will fill in the blanks. It will create the story for you. And what I've seen in my life is like, the more conscious that I become of the suffering that I am creating by buying into certain thoughts that pass through me, the more I'm able to be at peace when I catch myself in that suffering. I can be at peace with, oh, okay, I done it again. I'm creating this suffering. I don't need to suffer right now. And the thinking falls away. Because if we don't buy into the suffering, right? If we just didn't pay any attention to any of the thoughts that pass through our minds, right? They just whizzed through our minds, much like the weather, whizzes through the sky and the clouds pass through the sky, etc. Or if we stand on a bridge and we just watch the traffic go under the bridge and we don't really pay any particular attention to any of the cars, and if we did that with our thinking and we didn't pay any particular attention to the thoughts, what's our experience of life going to be, right? To me, we're left with our innate state of well-being rising to the surface. That zero state that is just our default factory settings as a human being rises to the surface, and it's one of peace, clarity, love, and abundance. And the only thing that takes us away from that is when we buy into or pay attention to certain thoughts. And through buying into that thought, a feeling is created within us. And then based on that feeling, we decide whether it's good or bad. If we're in a bad feeling, if we decide it's bad, then we suffer because we tell ourselves straight away, this is a bad feeling. I don't want to be feeling this. Therefore, I would prefer to be feeling something else. So straight away, we're not content with the feeling that we're experiencing in that moment. And when we do that, when I've done this in my life, that's when I've suffered. I've suffered at the hands of my own thinking because I've bought into the idea that a certain feeling or a certain experience I'm having is bad versus good. I've created a distinction in my mind that one outcome or one feeling is better than another. But the way that I like to look at things is that as human beings, right, we're very blessed in a way that we have this huge spectrum of emotions and feelings that we can experience, right? From like absolute anger and hate and devastation right through to love and joy and pure happiness and everything in between. There's a very broad spectrum. Whereas if we tell ourselves that one half of that spectrum is bad and one half of that spectrum is good, really they're neutral. They're neutral feelings. But if we tell ourselves that one half is bad, one half is good, then what we do is we create a distinction that these feelings over here on the bad side, I don't want to be feeling. And these feelings on the good side, I want to be feeling. So when we feel a bad feeling, we create conflict within ourselves. We create suffering because we're already telling ourselves, this isn't something I want to be feeling right now. I want to be feeling something good. And the same happens the other way around. When we're feeling something good, we want to hang on to it so much because we don't want to go back to feeling something bad. And we're just in this constant flux of suffering. And a lot of it is suffering needlessly because at the core of all of that is the fact that those feelings and those emotions that we experience are entirely neutral. All they are is a reflection of the thinking that we're having in this moment. And if we don't pay any particular attention, and if we don't give any more attention than is deserved to any particular thought, and therefore feeling, what's going to happen? What I've found is more often than not, the thinking passes because my thinking is changing all the time. My thinking is changing in every moment. There's always new thought following on from the current thought that I'm having. There's a new thought that's going to follow on from that one. There's a new thought that's going to follow on from that one. And when I lean into and rest in that understanding that the thoughts are just going to pass me by, whether I pay attention to them or not, the thoughts will pass me by. So it seems to be for me, the most sensible thing to do is not give too much attention to any thought that's passing me by. Because if I start to then attach all of this meaning, all of a sudden the thoughts and the feelings get heavy. We add weight to them, right? We've created some kind of distinction over what's good, what's bad. This experience is worse than this one. I would prefer to be feeling this one. If I'm not feeling this, I don't want to be feeling that. And it's just like a lot of suffering needlessly that's going on within our minds. So the question that I wanted to raise through this episode is, how conscious are you of the suffering that you are creating? Because to me, like I said, when I've become aware of the fact that I am the one who is actively participating in the creation of the feelings that I'm having via attaching meaning and creating distinctions around certain thoughts and certain feelings, I become aware of that, and the thinking falls away. And I allow the thought to pass through, and fresh thought comes through. And I allow that to pass through, and fresh thought comes through. And I allow that to pass through, and fresh thought comes through, and so on and so forth. And my life becomes a lot lighter. There's a lot more space in my life to experience things as they are. I never, well, I wouldn't say never. I don't as much anymore feel as much in conflict as I used to on such a regular basis. It's become a lot less regular for me. I can be okay in most scenarios or most situations because I understand that even if my thinking is saying X or Y, I'm the one who's creating the distinction over whether that feeling is good or bad. And either way is creating suffering. Whereas if I just allow the feelings to be what they are, I'm just left with peace and contentment and a feeling of ease. And there's a real effortlessness, that's a funny one, effortlessness to that, right? And the more I lean into that effortlessness, the more I realize there's nothing really to do with any thought. I don't have to do anything with any thought. I can just let it go. But it takes my active participation in the thought to create the feeling, to create the distinction, to then create the suffering. That seems like a lot more work. So something I'd like you to consider, having listened to this episode, and something I'd love to hear your answer to, is how conscious are you of the suffering that you're creating for yourself? And to answer that question, just please hit me up on Instagram at I'm Alex Manzi, DM me, answer the question. Or if you don't agree with some of the stuff I've said, or you're confused and you don't get it, please hit me up. I'd love to open the conversation with you, and I'm extending that invite out to you because I want to maintain these conversations with you. I'm not just here to shout at the microphone and to tell you stuff and to share my experience. I'm here because I want to create conversations around this stuff because it's been really helpful in my life, and I'd love to see if it can be helpful for you. I don't know if it can, but I'd love to see if it can be. And if you know someone who you think would benefit from hearing this episode, then send it to them. Send them the link, the screenshot, whatever it is, and let them know that this could be something beneficial for them to listen to. I started this podcast because I wanted to inspire a positive change, and you can be a part of that today by sharing this episode with someone you know. So I'd like to thank Michele Atsu for producing and editing this episode. I want to thank Hobgoblin for providing the music. And as ever, I want to thank you for spending time with me today, and I will see you for the next episode.